Welcome to the Out Agenda, coming to an archive.kpfk.org. Well, we have another segment of Radio QGLLU podcast, a show that takes a deep dive into what the queer, gay, and lesbian Latina community is talking about. I'm Rita Gonzalez.
I'm Mario J. Navoa.
And I'm Eduardo Archuleta.
In today's episode, we're talking with Abel Alvarado and his show Arena the Musical.
Abel Alvarado is a celebrated playwright and artist whose work resonates with authenticity and cultural significance. His award-winning work has been seen on numerous stages throughout the Los Angeles area, including Casa 0101, the Pasadena Playhouse, 24th Street Theater, the Renberg Theater, Plaza de la Raza, and the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse. His musical, Arena, a House Musical, has played to sold-out crowds with raving media reviews. As an openly gay Chicano producing the largest and longest-running festival, Brown and Out, is one of his greatest highlights and fulfills his lifelong mission to always amplify and uplift the voices of his comunidad that he loves through stories, music, and art. His acclaimed production, Arena, a House Musical, debuted at Casa 0101, bringing to life the vibrant house music scene of the 1990s at the legendary Arena Nightclub in Hollywood, California. The musical follows Lucio Torres, a young music minister grappling with his identity and seeking freedom, belonging, and self-expression.
This is Eduardo, and we're here today with Abel. Welcome, Abel.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, what inspired you to write Arena, a House Musical? How much Lucio Torres' journey reflects your own life experience?
So there was a couple of things, but the main thing was on December 31st, 2015, I was at the closing party for Circus Disco and Arena. Circus Disco had been open for 40 years at that point, Arena for 25 years. And Arena happened to open my senior year in high school. That was in Baldwin Park, California, where I was in high school. And I kept hearing about this place and that it was going to open. It was going to be this amazing club in Hollywood. And I just was like, well, I'll never go there because Hollywood seemed like a world away from Baldwin Park. It's only 25 miles west, but it might as well have been on the other side of the world. And not only that, it was a gay club. And at the time, I was very in the closet. And lo and behold, eventually I made my way down the Yellow Brick Road or the 10 freeway to the 101, exited Santa Monica Boulevard, and I ended up at the Arena. And when I walked in there, I just could not have even prepared myself for what I saw, which was about 2,000 openly gay at that moment on that dance floor, Latinos having the time of their life. And it really resonated within me. And so in my journey, as I went there more often and made friends, it really became a place where I met other gay people, other gay Latino people, other people who lived in my community. One of my best friends to this day, he lived about 4 blocks from me in Baldwin Park, but I met him at Arena. And so it really resonated within me. So in 2015, when it was closing and I was looking out at a sea of about 10,000 people, I just knew that this was a story that needed to be told. Stories about Latinos, Chicanos who are openly gay are few and far in between, much less stories about Latinos in the genre of musical theater, which is my cup of tea, which I mean, surprise, surprise, a gay man who likes musical theater, right? And that's what I work in, that's what I do. And so I just knew the story had to be told. As I walked around the crowd, I heard people crying, laughing, and how impactful both of these places had been. Throughout the years, I had met people at the anniversary parties who were there the first night when Circus Disco opened in 1974, all the way to young people like me at the time. And then, so that night, it was like a coming together of a people. That's the only way I could explain it. And I knew that the stories were in the stories that I was hearing. And so that is what inspired to tell the story about Arena. And the reason I focused on Arena was because of that, because it was the first gay nightclub I went to. It was the first Latino gay nightclub I went to. And it really spoke to my generation of Generation X. And that's where I developed the story and the inspiration from.
This is Mario. Looking at people at the closing of Circus, you must have remembered back on the people that you met there. Can you share a little bit more about your memories and in terms of its culture, the culture that you found within Arena or at Circus or both that really informed the way you wanted to tell the story?
Yes, like I mentioned, my best friend to this day, he lived 4 blocks away from me in Baldwin Park, but I met him at Arena. He was an amazing club kid, an amazing artist, drag queen. And when we met, he was just this fabulous person. And he was only like 21 years old. And here I was like 23. And I just was so mesmerized at how someone like him, who grew up in Baldwin Park in the San Gabriel Valley, not in Hollywood, not in the limelight, and he came from working class, Latino Chicano parents, was so open and so just, well, self-assured to walk out of his house in Baldwin Park in full drag to go to Arena, right? That was very inspiring. There was other people that I met who, some people who were very young, like me at the time, and were living with HIV and AIDS. And some of them, I would meet them, and a few months later, they were gone. And I would ask about them, and they were like, "Oh, this was the early to mid '90s," and that was another thing that really impacted me. That people my age were dying, and I would meet them, like I said, and then a few months later, I'd ask about them, or I just wouldn't see them around. Where's so and so? Oh, he died, and it was just like such a for a young person, we don't think about death, but it was like something that became very relevant to me. And other people that I met was the infamous Miss Martin. That was one of the first drag queens I ever saw performing. And here was this 6'3", 300-pound drag queen with crazy hair and crazy makeup. And she was everything that the world would not deem as beautiful, but it was just a mesmerizing, beautiful experience to see her up there moving light as a feather and kind of, without saying a word about anything, kind of telling the world, here I am, look at me. And none of us could keep our eyes off of her. And, as an artist, that's what I've always felt is a true artist creates something that impacts people. And that's exactly what she was doing in those 3, 4, 5 minutes that she was performing on stage. I also ran into people who I grew up with, that I knew, that were, I didn't even know they were gay, and they would be there, and it was like this coming out experience with them. And what it really did was, it's just one night a week that you would go there, but in those 5 hours that I would spend there, every time I walked out the doors, I had a little bit more bravery. I had a little bit more sense of who I was, to the point where that just built and built and built. And I was able to, within a period of time, come out and also live openly gay and not be afraid of who saw me, and not be afraid of who was going to reject me, because I had found a new community of people who we were all in the same boat. Many of us thought very differently, but we had one thing in common, which was this coming out experience. Yeah. And I would meet older people. Eventually, when I went to Circus, I met some wonderful people who, like I said, had been at, Circus the day it opened, and they were friends with Jean LaPietra, and they were older people, and just listening to them and hearing them, and, eventually becoming friends with them and hearing their stories of what life was like, being, a closeted gay person and then an openly gay person in the 70s coming to Circus Disco and feeling that they didn't have to hide in the shadows, but there was this beautiful place with beautiful lighting that celebrated who they were. It was like an epiphany to me that the coming out experience wasn't just something that I was going through, but it was something that all of these people had went through or were going through.
You talked about both Circus and Arena, and there the music was at Circus back in the day was disco, because
Mm-hmm.
I remember, because I went there in the late 80s, early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and then house music pretty much at Arena. How did that play a role in your musical, or your concept of creating this musical? And how'd you go about incorporating that into what became your play, your musical?
Yeah, so one of the very important pieces is that, house music defined my generation, Generation X. It was something that was new to us. It's kind of like disco music inspired the generation before us. It was such a new concept, the driving beat, and me being a musician and understanding music, um, I would go to Arena, and one of the most powerful things I would hear was when the resident DJ, DJ Irene, would shout the words, "Where's all the Latinos in the house tonight?" And the crowd would go wild. And at the time, I didn't quite understand what a powerful statement and how empowering it was to hear 2,000 people responding back with yes, but it was very impacting to me. And the music, it was so new, and it was like this, because house music is just an extension of disco, right?
Right.
It's just the bass beat is driven up a little bit more. It's more in the forefront, and it's, the beats per minute are a little bit faster. And so I would go, and this is the part that's true to the musical. Lucio is raised in an apostolic home, and he's the music director at his church, which is what I was at the time. I grew up apostolic Pentecostal. I was third generation. I'm what people say I was born under the pews of the church, and I came from a family that was music oriented. I started, picking up instruments at a young age, and the church really facilitated that artistry. The Apostolic Church, that Pentecostal church, really, one of the biggest driving forces is the music. And by the time I was going to Arena, I already had a choir. I was a music director at church. I led church services with the praise and worship. And what I started noticing was that the house music sounded like my favorite music, which is
Oh,
Black
wow.
gospel music. And I was like, wow, the beats are very similar. The messages of hope, the messages of having a good time, whether it's having a good time on the dance floor or having a good time in the presence of God at church, those messages really resounded to me. So even I would get home sometimes, and I'd be like, this was before there was internet, and the only way, and they wouldn't play this music on the radio. The only way you could get this music would be if, your friend was a DJ and you were like, oh, make me a cassette or make me a CD. And that's how you would hear this music, because it didn't get radio play, right? Because house
Right.
music was considered underground music.
Right.
And I would get home and I'd be like, oh, that song deep, deep inside, how would it sound if a choir sang it? Like, how would it sound if I dropped, a harmony into it? And so from a young age, I would do that. And unbeknownst to my choir, I was throwing a little bit of that into songs we were learning. And so I immediately connected the two, which was gospel music and house music. And, later on, I found out that house music does have its roots in gospel, as does disco. So that's why it was important for me to write this in that fashion. House music kind of represents a breakaway from what society at large was listening to, with, popular music. And like I said, it was underground at the time. And it was very powerful that a mujer, a Latina lesbian, was leading the charge of all of this, which is DJ Irene, who was the only resident female DJ at Arena, and she built it to what it was through her music. I've often told her, I'm like, it was like your music ministry, right? Because we would go there and listen to it, and the music gave us the freedom to dance, the freedom to laugh, the freedom to just be expressive. So yeah, I connected all of that when I started writing, and I love house music because of that.
This is Mario. What were some of the challenges you faced in bringing Arena to the stage at Casa 0101? And how did you overcome them? And I also wanted to ask you what it felt like to finally see it on the stage.
So as I mentioned, I early on in life, my first love of artistry was music. When I left the church, it was I was never told to leave the church, but when I came out, it was like I was gently shown the door, right? And it was like, well, you can stay if you don't say that you're gay, but you can't hold ministry, you can't. And there was stuff that happened, and that was right around the age when I was about 24, and my choir was going to be signed to a gospel record label, and I just knew that at the time, if I signed to that, I was almost like, chaining myself to it, and I was never going to be able to come out. So I left all things music when I left the church, and but I'm an artist. That's the only thing I know how to be in life, is an artist. And I started designing, and I started doing other things in artistry, and then theater, and I eventually started writing because I had been designing, and Casa did the Brown and Out Festival, and I started getting involved in that. And Josefina Lopez was very instrumental in helping me explore other avenues of my artistry. And one day I was just telling her, about my upbringing, and she's like, "You play the piano?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, you need to do that more. Do it again." Like, and then the writing part, I had shown her a short play that I had written. She was like, "You need to write more." And so she was very instrumental in that. So when I started writing Arena, one of the challenges, like, this is a side challenge, that I started interviewing people, and everyone had their version of what Arena was, right? Oh, we were the most popular house. Oh, we were the most, and and no, that's not how it went. It went this way, and someone else would say, and I was just, I would just listen, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to tell this story without offending people? And then it was just a matter of, well, take the stories and write them. And I started doing that and interweaving it with my story and my experience. And so one of the challenges was, well, there's never been a house musical. And I was very clear that I wanted to make it a house musical with house music. But when I presented it to Josefina for the first time, she just, and it was a very short version. And I thought, oh, I'll do a 10-minute version at Brown and Out. And when she read it, she told me straight up, she said, "This isn't a 10-minute musical. This is a full production." She said, and she sat with me, and I'm forever grateful for this, that Josefina Lopez, renowned playwright, sat with me for 6 hours and outlined the story, helped me outline it. And we sat there at Casa Fina. She called me up. She said, "Meet me at Casa Fina." And we sat down and we ate, and we just outlined it. And then she said, "Write the book. Don't think about the music. Write the book." So I started writing the book, the play, and started noting where the music would go. And so it was the first time that I was like jumping into this realm of writing a full devised musical. And so at some point I knew that I couldn't be the composer, because although I do play the piano, I'm not that level of composing music and tracks and writing out the music. And so it was about finding someone who was as dedicated. I had went through the musical writing workshop at New Musicals Inc. And fortunately, I met really good composers, and I met the composer that would eventually become the composer of Arena, which is Ben Larson, and my friend Gabby Maldonado, who's also a music director at Casa, became the lyricist. So that was one of the challenges, was putting a team together that really felt the story. And it was hard because some of these people are 10, 15 years younger than me. They never even knew what Arena was. So it was about getting people to understand this, artists who would help me write it, and getting them to understand what the story really represented. And that was one of the biggest challenges. And then COVID. COVID hit right when we were going into rehearsals for the first workshop. And we were literally in the second week of rehearsals, and producers came in and said, we're shutting it down because the whole world is shutting down. And, that was really depressing, because, you see something going forward and then suddenly it's just shut down and who knows what's going to happen. But it really, the producers were wonderful. Conrado Terrazas, Emmanuel Deliage, they really helped navigate the process of producing, of coming up with the money. And instead of taking that moment as a strike against us, they took it as a moment to rethink, okay, how can we retool this? Where can we really find the money for this? And so when COVID started lifting and we went into rehearsals for the first workshop again, that was very challenging. Wearing masks. Do you wear masks? In a musical, you have to sing. In a play, you have to see people's facial expression. And those were challenges that I think the whole world was facing. And as artists, we were trying to come up with solutions for all of these things. So those were major challenges. And also, there were challenges of looking for financing and other people saying or thinking, well, this story about gay people has already been told, there's already rent. And my response was always, yeah, but it's never been from a Chicano's perspective.
Exactly.
It's never been based out of LA. Like, I would tell people about Circus and Arena and they had no clue what it was. And I was like, do you see how important this story is? These two places were cultural high grounds for people. Circus Disco was around since 1974. It was around before Studio 54 and long after Studio 54. And it wasn't a place like Studio 54 that was exclusive. It was looking to exclude people. Circus was there to include everybody. And that was one of the most amazing things that Jean LaPietra told me when I interviewed him, was that he and his partner, Ed Lemos, they wanted to create a place where their gente, their people, Latinos, could come and not be turned away at the door and be who they were. And that Circus was open about 15 years before Arena. But in those 15 years, so many people came through there, and so many Latino LGBT people were empowered because of that place, which led to Arena being open. And that was one of the challenges of getting people to understand that's why this story is relevant. That's why this story, it's not just another cuento of a nightclub. Like, people, because people think of nightclubs as places of debauchery and stuff that happens in the dark, but Arena and Circus proved to be more than that. So getting people to understand that was, but people who heard it and got it immediately, they were just behind it 100%. That first workshop, when it opened in fall of 2021, was completely sold out for 7 weeks.
Wow.
And then it was cut short at the 5th week because of COVID, and the lead got COVID and 5 other people so we had to shut down literally on a Friday night as audience was getting there, which was happening a lot in theater at that moment. And then in 2022, the premiere production, it was also sold out for a 6-week production, and 4 weeks in, same thing. COVID just kind of messed things up. So that was challenging, like, yay, we're going forward. Stop, wait. Yay, we're going forward. Stop, wait. That was challenging, but the team was absolutely amazing of really ensuring that I, as the writer and creator of this, and the other people on the team, that everyone was always encouraging each other with, no, we have a great product here. We have a great story here. We're going to keep going. And, that's what it's proven to be, because in the past 4 years, there has been a production or a version of the production of this show every year.
Wow. This is Eduardo again. And the themes of identity, self-expression, and belonging are central to the play. What's your message? What do you hope the audience takes away from Lucio's journey?
That it really does take there's journeys that we have to take in life, right? Everything isn't just like, I woke up one day and I was this like proud, openly gay Latino man. It took steps for me to get there, but I had to take those steps, right? Also, one of the themes of it is the story is really about a father and a son. And during the productions, I had so many gay men come to me and say, that was my journey with my dad when I came out. And some of them never resolved it. And some of them still were working on resolving it. And some of them did resolve it. And, it was very important for me. I think Latino fathers have been long portrayed as these machistas, misogynistic, unloving people. And even right now in this current climate, a lot of that is being said about Latinos. And although that does exist, but I also want Latino fathers to see that change is possible, that you can love your gay son, you can love your trans daughter, you can love them because they're your children. And at the end of the day, that's who they continue to be. And familia is something that is very important to Latinos. I think it's important in all cultures, but I can only speak on the Latino experience, how familia is very, very important to us. It's a unit that we feel we belong to, and to be left out of familia is kind of one of the worst things that could happen to a Latino. But I do think that we as a gente, we as a people, we can define what that familia is. That familia is our parents, our tios, our siblings, but it's also your friends that you meet at Arena 30 years ago who are still part of your life and who know your parents and who know your tias, and we're a people who really, we do define familia. I have so many members of my family that they're not blood relatives, but they were immigrants who came to this country and had nowhere to go. And my tia met them at work and was like, well, let me help you. I'm a citizen, but let me help you get. And we helped them, and they lived at my grandmother's house, and they became part of our familia. And that is one of the strongest themes in the show. Lucio in the story, my friend Ray, he told me how he came out to his dad, and he's like, I just started writing this letter, and before I knew it, I had this 20-page letter that I sent to my dad. And he said it was when I was going to UCLA, and he said that his dad was a former gang member, and he told his dad, one of the things you taught me was loyalty, and I need to be loyal to you and tell you the truth of who I am. If not, I'm lying to you, Dad. And I want to be loyal to you, loyal to this familia, loyal to our people. And so that was one of the parts that I wove in, and where Lucio's writing this letter throughout his journey in this show. And in the end, his dad reads the letter and he says those exact words, like, Mijo, in your letter, you told me one of the greatest things I ever showed you was loyalty. And Lucio tells him, yes, and I can't be loyal to you if I'm lying to you, because lying to someone is not being loyal. And it really like resounds. And the final song that the father and son sing together, it's called No Sé Cómo. And the last two lines of lyric, they both say, the dad says, I don't know how to accept you. And Lucio says, I don't know how to forgive you. And they both say together, but I'd like to try. And that really hits home to people, because oftentimes as gay people, we're not saying, oh, accept us in who we are and all my locura, but we're just saying, what, can you try? And I think that is like in humanity, if we try to learn from each other, if we at least give the step, if we take that first step of trying, there's a lot of great things that could come out of that. Relationships can be mended, acceptance can happen. So that was one of the resounding themes through it. Yeah.
This is Mario again. Abel, what's next for you?
Well, Arena was just produced again a few weeks ago as a concert. And it was absolutely amazing to see. I was often in musicals because people are moving around so much and dancing and jumping while they're singing. You know, the songs come through, but they don't come through as when the actors are just standing there and singing these beautiful notes and singing these beautiful melodies and harmonies. So we just did that. And all throughout, but especially after the concert, a lot of people have been asking, where can I find the soundtrack to this? Like, what I want to bump it in my car, you know, because like how, you know, it's Arena, a house musical. So there are some house songs in there that are from the 90s that we retooled for to be in the show as musical theater. But then some of the original songs are written in the style of house music. But then there's ballads in there that are beautiful and people just like it. So we're looking at producing with DJ Irene. DJ Irene has been a strong supporter of the show since the beginning, and now she's come on board as an associate producer.
Wow.
And one of the things that we're exploring is Irene producing the singles of the two main title songs, and then possibly even doing a cast album.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Abel.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And yeah.
Thank you to our guest, Abel Alvarado, who shared his story about making Arena a house musical. I'm Mario J. Navoa.
And I'm Eduardo Chuleta.
This podcast is a segment of The Out Agenda. Radio QGLU is a product of KPFK. I'm Rita Gonzalez, and we want to hear from you. Like us on our Facebook page or email us at theoutagenda@gmail.com. You can find Radio QGLU on all podcast platforms. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful week. And remember that being out is the first step to being equal. Now stay tuned for This Way Out.